Have you ever wondered why a piece of music recorded over half a century ago by 5 distinct, clashing egos in a cramped London studio still possesses the raw power to make the hairs on your arms stand up, while the meticulously engineered, mathematically perfect, and market-tested pop hits of today vanish from your memory before the track even finishes? To truly grasp the monolithic stature of And You and I within the pantheon of progressive rock, one must first abandon the pedestrian, radio-friendly notion of a song. This is not a song in any conventional sense. It is a sonic architecture, a deliberate construction of emotional geography that defies the instant gratification culture that has since eroded the collective attention span of the modern listener. We are examining the emotional center of Close to the Edge, an album that effectively drew the blueprint for symphonic rock. And in this specific track, we find the absolute equilibrium between technical arrogance and pastoral beauty. It is a masterclass in tension, release, and the manipulation of timbre, achieved by musicians who treated their instruments not as mere tools for accompaniment, but as weapons of mass expression. The brilliance of And You and I does not lie in a catchy chorus or a danceable beat. It lies in its audacity to treat rock music as a legitimate form of high art, equal in weight to the classical symphonies that inspired its structure, yet executed with the raw, electrified energy of a band at the absolute peak of its creative powers. We must begin by dissecting the catalyst of this composition, which is the acoustic guitar work of Steve Howe. In an era where the electric guitar was treated as a phallic symbol of volume and distortion, dominated by the blues-based pentatonic scales of contemporaries like Jimmy Page or Eric Clapton, Howe stripped the instrument back to its folk roots, but applied a harmonic sophistication that was utterly alien to the rock vernacular of 1972. The opening motif is not merely a chord progression, it is a study in natural harmonics and open string resonance. Howe constructs a dense acoustic architecture, utilizing a complex interplay of 12-string harmonics in the intro to create a shimmering, ethereal ceiling, while grounding the core verses of Chord of Life with a pristine, intimate 6-string strumming texture, predominantly played on a Martin 0018. This layering creates a natural chorus effect that no digital pedal or rack-mounted processor can replicate. The genius here is the initial mistake, the tuning check, the casual strum, the voice of John Anderson checking the tape, asking "okay," followed by the confirmation. Most producers would have cut this. Eddie offered and the band left it in. Why? Because it grounds the listener. It establishes the tactile human element before the transcendence begins. It is a reminder that what follows is performed by human hands, not sequenced by a computer. When the primary motif of Chord of Life enters, it relies on a specific strumming pattern that emphasizes the upbeats, creating a rolling, circular rhythm that feels less like a rock beat and more like a breathing cycle. The harmonic structure here is deceptively simple, hovering around D major, but it uses suspended fourths and seconds to avoid generic resolution, keeping the listener in a state of perpetual anticipation. This is the mark of a composer who understands that satisfaction comes from the journey, not the arrival. As the piece unfolds, we are introduced to the rhythm section, which is where the true subversive nature of Yes resides, and where the casual listener often gets lost. In 99% of rock music, the bass guitar is a utilitarian instrument designed to marry the kick drum to the harmony, usually indistinguishable from the low end of the guitar. Chris Squire spat on that convention. His Rickenbacker 4001, wired in stereo using the Ricco sound output, was split between a Marshall stack for the high frequencies and a bass amp for the lows, producing a tone that is distinct, aggressive, and melodic. In And You and I, Squire does not play a bass line, he plays a counter melody in the lower register. If you isolate his track, you hear independent melodic lines that weave around Anderson's vocals and Howe's chords. He utilizes a pick, attacking the strings with a violence that produces a treble-heavy clank, yet his phrasing is lyrically delicate. This is the lead bass concept that defined the Yes sound. He is not supporting the music, he is driving it. Beside him we have Bill Bruford, a drummer who openly despised the standard 4/4 backbeat that defines Western pop music. Bruford's contribution to this track is a masterclass in economy and jazz displacement. He plays with a light touch, treating the snare and cymbals as textural elements rather than just timekeepers. He understands the power of silence. In the quieter passages, he doesn't play a beat. He accents the phrases. This restraint is what separates a technician from a true musician. When the band swells, Bruford doesn't just get louder, he gets busier, fracturing the rhythm into complex subdivisions that propel the music forward without ever losing the groove. It is a tragedy of musical history that this was his final studio album with the band during their classic 1970s era. Although paths would cross again decades later, the telepathic chemistry he shared with Squire on this specific recording was a lightning-in-a-bottle moment that never truly struck twice. Then there is the structural evolution of the piece. The transition from the folk-influenced chord of life into eclipse is one of the most jarring, risky, and brilliant moments in recorded music. We move from the intimacy of an acoustic campfire to the terrifying grandeur of a Gothic cathedral in the span of a few bars. This shift is powered by Rick Wakeman and the mellotron. For the uninitiated, the mellotron is an archaic, temperamental beast of a keyboard that plays actual tape loops of recorded strings and choirs. It is lo-fi, wobbly, and haunts the frequency spectrum with a ghostly grain that digital samples utterly fail to capture. When Wakeman slams down those massive chords in Eclipse, the mood shifts from optimism to existential dread. The tempo slows dramatically. The harmony becomes darker, utilizing modal interchange to borrow chords from the parallel minor, creating a sense of foreboding. This is the Sturm und Drang, the storm and stress. It serves a narrative purpose. You cannot have the light without the darkness. The heaviness of this section makes the eventual return to the major key feel earned, not given. It is emotional manipulation of the highest order. Wakeman's synthesizer work, specifically on the Minimoog, is often cited as flashy, but here he shows remarkable restraint. His sweeping lines in the Preacher section are not about playing as many notes as possible. They are about mimicking the glissando of a human voice or a violin. He uses the pitch wheel to bend notes into the fabric of the song, creating a soaring, ethereal texture that lifts the entire arrangement into the stratosphere. We must also address the elephant in the room, John Anderson's lyrics. Critics and cynics have spent decades mocking them as nonsensical hippie gibberish. These critics are intellectual lightweights who fail to understand the function of phonetics in music. Anderson treats words as percussion and texture. The meaning of "and you and I" is not found in a literal interpretation of lines like "sad preacher nailed upon the colored door of time." The meaning is found in the vowel sounds, the consonants, and the imagery they evoke. It is impressionist painting in verbal form. The lyrics are meant to bypass the analytical brain and strike the emotional center. The katru, or the spiritual themes, are vehicles for the melody. Anderson's voice, an alto tenor of pristine clarity, cuts through the dense instrumentation like a laser. He sings with a sincerity that borders on the naive, which is exactly what the music requires. If he sang with irony or detachment, the entire structure would collapse. The multi-part vocal harmonies, often layering Anderson, Squire, and Howe, create a choral effect that rivals ecclesiastical music. They treat the voice as another layer of the synthesizer, creating a wall of sound that is overwhelmingly human, yet distinctly otherworldly. The structural integrity of "and you and I" owes more to the classical sonata form or the multi-movement suite than to rock and roll. It is divided into 4 distinct movements: Chord of Life, Eclipse, the Preacher, the Teacher, and Apocalypse. This compartmentalization allows the band to explore different tempos, keys, and moods, while maintaining a cohesive thematic thread. The recurrence of the opening acoustic theme serves as a leitmotif, anchoring the listener as the band ventures into sonic experimentation. This is a technique borrowed from Wagner and Beethoven, applied to a rock ensemble. The genius lies in the seamlessness of the transitions. The band rehearsed this material to the point of exhaustion, ensuring that the tempo changes felt organic rather than calculated. When the track builds to its climax in Apocalypse, it is a triumph of dynamics. The reintroduction of the main theme, now performed with the full weight of the electric instruments and the majestic swell of the mellotron, provides a catharsis that is rare in modern music. It is the musical equivalent of reaching the summit of a mountain after a grueling climb. The resolution is not just harmonic, it is spiritual. Furthermore, the production values engineered by Eddie Offord play a crucial role in why this track endures. In 1972, there were no digital audio workstations, no undo buttons, and no auto-tune. This recording is a capture of a performance. The stereo separation is aggressive, with instruments panned hard left and right to create a wide, immersive soundstage. This was done to accommodate the density of the arrangement. If everything were panned center, it would be a muddy mess. The clarity of the individual instruments is astonishing. You can hear the pick hitting the strings on the bass. You can hear the breath intake before a vocal line. This tactile reality gives the recording a lifespan that sterile digital productions lack. It breathes. It fluctuates. There are micro-timing discrepancies between the instruments that create a rub, a friction that generates energy. Modern production seeks to eliminate this friction in favor of the grid, thereby sterilizing the music. And You and I retains its grit. It sounds like 5 people in a room, struggling against the limits of their technology to create something bigger than themselves. The interplay during the preacher, the teacher section deserves specific analysis. Here the band locks into a groove that is ostensibly in a standard meter, yet feels fluid. Howe switches to a more electric biting tone, trading licks with Wakeman's keyboards. This section demonstrates the band's ability to orchestrate. They are not stepping on each other's toes. When the guitar is busy, the keyboards recede to pads. When the synth takes the lead, the guitar drops to rhythmic comping. This is the result of discipline. The popular misconception of progressive rock is that it is self-indulgent noodling. While that may be true of the genre's imitators, the masters like Yes practiced a rigorous form of composition where every note had to justify its existence. The complexity was never for complexity's sake. It was to serve the emotional arc of the piece. The polyphony, the simultaneous sounding of independent melodic lines, is reminiscent of Bach. You can listen to this track 100 times and focus on a different instrument each time, finding new nuances, new fills, new harmonic substitutions that you missed previously. That is the definition of high art. It rewards repeated engagement. Let us not ignore the cultural context. This piece was released in 1972. A time when the optimism of the 1960s was curdling into the cynicism of the 1970s, and You and I stands as a defiant monument to idealism. It rejects the blues-based cynicism of the Rolling Stones, or the nihilism of the emerging heavy metal scene. It posits that transcendence is possible. It suggests that there is a chord of life that connects humanity. This message, delivered through such sophisticated musical channels, resonated with a generation that was looking for something more substantial than 3-minute love songs. It challenged the listener to sit down, shut up, and pay attention for 10 minutes. It demanded engagement. Today, in an era of passive consumption and playlist algorithms, this demand feels almost revolutionary. It forces you to stop multitasking. You cannot have And You and I in the background. It dominates the space. It insists on being heard. The complexity of the acoustic guitar tuning used by Steve Howe is a subject that demands a paragraph of its own, for it is the skeleton key to the track's unique voicing. While many assume standard EADGBE tuning, Howe often employed subtle variations, or simply exploited the natural chorusing of the 12-string to create a drone that implies a modal tuning even when one isn't present. The timbre he extracts from the instrument is crystalline, devoid of the muddy low-mids that plague lesser acoustic recordings. He plays with a combination of plectrum and fingers, allowing for a hybrid picking style that permits bass notes to ring out while simultaneously executing rapid-fire arpeggios on the treble strings. This technique creates the illusion of 2 guitarists playing at once. In the live setting, seeing Howe navigate this while strapped with a Gibson ES-175 and a pedal steel is a testament to the man's sheer dexterity. But on the record, The purity of that acoustic track is the glue that holds the entire symphonic mess together. It provides the pastoral earthiness that grounds Wakeman's cosmic synth explorations. Without that acoustic foundation, the track would float away into the ether. With it, the song remains rooted in the soil of English folk tradition. Moreover, one cannot overlook the harmonic language employed by the band. While rock music generally adheres to the pentatonic scale and the I-VU-V progression, Yes in this era was pulling from the harmonic vocabulary of late 19th century classical music and jazz fusion. The chords are rarely simple triads. They are stacked with extensions, ninths, 11ths, and 13ths, that create a lush, dense texture. In the Eclipse section, the chord progression defies standard functional analysis, moving in blocks of sound that prioritize color over leading tone resolution. This creates a sense of spatial disorientation, which is perfectly matched by the swirling, phased effects on the vocals. It is a psychedelic experience induced not by drugs, but by music theory. The tension created by these complex harmonies demands a resolution, and when the band finally lands on a clear, consonant major chord, the release is physical. It triggers a dopamine response in the brain of the attentive listener. This is sophisticated psychoacoustics at work. The final moments of the track, where the instrumentation falls away to leave just the acoustic guitar and the distant vocal, bring the journey full circle. It is a compositional technique known as bookending, providing a sense of closure. The listener has traveled through the storm of Eclipse and the grandeur of The Preacher to return to the simplicity of the chord of life, but the context has changed. The simple melody now carries the weight of the entire suite. It feels resolved. The final D major chord is not just a musical conclusion, it is a sigh of relief. This cyclical structure mimics the cycle of life itself: birth, struggle, enlightenment, and return. It is a grand narrative compressed into 10 minutes and 8 seconds of vinyl. There is a lesson here for the modern musician and the modern listener. We live in an age of quantization, where every drum hit is snapped to a grid, and every vocal is tuned to perfection. We have traded humanity for perfection, and in doing so, we have lost the soul of the music. And You and I is perfect because of its imperfections. It is the sound of risk. It is the sound of 5 musicians listening to each other, reacting in real time, and building a structure that could collapse at any moment but doesn't. It is high wire walking without a net. To appreciate this track is to appreciate the struggle of creation. It requires patience. It requires you to surrender your need for a hook every 15 seconds. But the reward for that patience is a musical experience that is transcendent. To summarize the greatness of And You and I is to reduce a cathedral to a pile of bricks. Its status as a masterpiece is confirmed not by critics, but by its endurance. It is a piece of music that refuses to age because it does not rely on the production fads of its time. It relies on the fundamental principles of harmony, melody, rhythm, and counterpoint, executed by virtuosos who were unafraid of being uncool. It is a testament to what happens when musicianship is valued over image, and when ambition is unchecked by commercial considerations. It remains a towering achievement, a beacon for anyone who believes that rock music can be more than just entertainment, that it can be a spiritual experience. If you cannot hear the majesty in this track, you are not listening with your ears. You are listening with your prejudices. Open your mind, turn off your phone, and let the music dismantle your cynicism. This is not just a song. It is a triumph of the human spirit.